Have you ever been home alone, tucked in for the night, and heard a sound that made your blood run cold? A floorboard creaking with a weight that shouldn't be there? A whisper from a room you know is empty? We tell ourselves it's the house settling, the wind, our imagination, and most of the time, it is. But sometimes, it's not. Tonight, I want to share 3 stories with you. Not campfire tales or fictional creepypastas, but accounts from real people who experienced something that defied all explanation, something that forever changed their idea of what is possible in this world. We'll not only delve into what happened but also explore the unsettling questions and psychological impacts that linger long after the events themselves. Our first story comes from a woman named Clara. She and her husband had just moved into their dream home, a charming old Victorian house on a quiet, tree-lined street. They were thrilled by its character: the original hardwood floors, the stained glass windows, the sense of history. The previous owners were an elderly couple who had lived there for 50 years, and the sale was surprisingly quick and smooth. The moving process was exhausting, and on their very first night, surrounded by a fortress of unpacked boxes, they collapsed into bed, falling into a deep sleep. A few hours later, Clara was jolted awake not by a crash, but by a sound. It was the distinct, melodic sound of their wind chimes hanging on the back porch. The problem was, it was a perfectly still night. There was no wind. She lay there, listening, her heart starting to pound in rhythm with the gentle, random chiming. It wasn't a frantic jangling, but a soft, deliberate melody, as if an invisible hand was carefully selecting which chimes to touch. She woke her husband, but he just mumbled, "It's an old house, honey. Probably just a draft," and was snoring again within seconds. The next night, it happened again. 2:17 a.m. The same soft, windless chiming. And the night after that. Always between 2 and 3 a.m. Her husband never seemed to wake up for it, no matter how hard she shook him. After a week of this, sleep deprived and her nerves frayed, Clara decided on a course of action. She would set up her phone on the kitchen windowsill, pointing towards the porch, to record the sound. She needed proof, something to show her husband, to confirm she wasn't losing her mind. She pressed record and went to bed, her anxiety making sleep difficult. The next morning, she eagerly played back the video, her stomach in knots. There it was, the soft, eerie chiming of the wind chimes, clear as day. But as she listened, her blood went cold. Because in between the notes, she could hear something else. A faint, whispering voice, a child's voice, seeming to come from the center of the chimes, singing a single, repeating phrase along with the melody. "I'm outside. I'm outside. I'm outside." Shaken to her core, Clara did what anyone would do in the modern age. She started researching. She spent days at the local library, scouring old newspapers and public records. It was there she discovered that 60 years prior, a little girl named Abigail had lived in the house. She had a fondness for music and would often play in the backyard. One autumn day, she had gone missing. The official report stated she had likely wandered into the woods and gotten lost, but her body was never found. The only item of hers that was never accounted for was a small, handmade set of brass wind chimes, a gift from her grandmother. Clara and her husband took the chimes down that very day. The haunting melody never returned. But sometimes, on a perfectly still night, Clara will wake up at 2:17 a.m. and swear she can still hear the faint, ghostly echo of a child's voice, whispering from the now empty porch. Our second story is more recent, from the age of smart homes and digital convenience, where our fears have evolved from things that go bump in the night to things that glitch in the code. A man named David lived alone in a sleek, modern apartment. He was a tech enthusiast, and his home was a web of interconnected smart devices, lights that turned on with a voice command, a thermostat that learned his preferences, and several voice-activated assistants placed throughout the rooms. One evening, he was relaxing on his couch, watching TV, when the device in his kitchen suddenly spoke up, its neutral, digital voice cutting through the dialogue of his show. Motion detected in the nursery. David froze. He didn't have a nursery. He lived alone. The silence that followed felt heavier than before. He grabbed a knife from the kitchen block, his heart hammering against his ribs, and cautiously cleared every room, every closet, even checking under the beds. The apartment was empty. He chalked it up to a software bug, unplugged the device, and tried to forget about it, blaming his own jumpiness. But the next day, it happened again. This time, he was washing dishes, and the device in his living room announced, with the same sterile tone, "Motion detected in the nursery." A cold dread began to seep into him. This continued for days. Different devices, all reporting activity in a non-existent room. David was a logical man. He changed all his passwords, reset his entire network to factory settings, and even called the device manufacturer's support line, who assured him it was a rare but known firmware issue they were patching. Nothing worked. The announcements became more frequent, sometimes during the day, but always at night. Desperate, sleep-deprived, and feeling a strange mix of fear and fury, he decided to play along. He stood in the middle of his living room, the heart of his digital domain, and said, his voice trembling slightly, "Okay. Open the nursery." Instantly, every smart device in his apartment responded in perfect, chilling unison. Their voices overlapped, creating a distorted, robotic chorus. "I'm sorry," they said. "I can't do that. The nursery is only for the children." And at that moment, his smart TV flickered on by itself, the screen casting a cold, blue light across his pale face. It displayed the grainy, black and white feed of a baby monitor. It showed an empty, dark room with a single, old-fashioned wooden rocking chair, moving slowly back and forth, creaking softly though the TV's speakers. David unplugged every device that night. He now lives in a home filled with analog switches and silent, dumb appliances. He says the silence is still unnerving, but it's a silence he can trust. Our final story takes us back several decades, to a time before smartphones and home assistants, where fear was a more primal, tangible thing. A young boy named Thomas lived with his family in a sprawling, rural farmhouse that had been in his mother's family for generations. His bedroom was in the finished attic, a long, narrow space with a sloped ceiling, exposed beams, and a single, large window at the far end that looked out over the endless fields. Every night, without fail, his mother would come up the creaky stairs to tuck him in. It was their ritual. He would be in his pajamas, buried under the heavy quilts, and she would sit on the edge of the bed, tell him a story, kiss his forehead, and walk out, closing the door behind her. He would watch the sliver of light under the door, tracing the shadow of her feet as they moved down the hall and descended the stairs, the final creak of the bottom step signaling he was truly alone for the night. One night, when he was about 8, he was having trouble sleeping. A storm was brewing outside, and the wind was making the old house groan. He had just watched his mother's shadow disappear and heard the final creak of the stairs when he heard a different sound, a soft, deliberate creak from the darkest corner of his room. He squinted, his eyes adjusting, and his breath caught in his throat. A tall, dark figure was standing silently in the corner, a shape he had, until that moment, always dismissed as just a pile of clothes on a chair. He was paralyzed with fear. The figure didn't move. For what felt like an eternity, they just stood there, watching each other in the near total darkness. Then, slowly, it began to move towards his bed. It didn't walk so much as it glided, its form seeming to absorb the faint light from the window. As it got closer, Thomas squeezed his eyes shut, praying for it to be a dream, for his mother to come back, for anything but this. He felt the mattress depress as a weight sat on the edge of his bed, in the exact spot his mother always did. He felt a cold, dry hand gently stroke his hair. And then he heard a voice, a perfect imitation of his mother's voice, but somehow hollow, like it was echoing down a long pipe. Whisper, "It's okay, Thomas. I forgot to tell you something. I'm still here." He must have fainted from terror, because the next thing he knew, sunlight was streaming through the window. He never slept in that room again, making a nest on the floor of his younger brother's room instead. His parents thought it was a phase, a childhood nightmare. Years later, as an adult at a family gathering, the topic of the old farmhouse came up. Thomas, now a father himself, finally told his mother about that night, laughing it off as a silly childhood fear. But his mother didn't laugh. She went pale. She confessed that on that exact night, she had come back upstairs a few minutes after tucking him in because she had forgotten to tell him that his father would be leaving for a business trip very early the next morning. But when she cracked the door open, she saw a dark, tall figure sitting on his bed, stroking his hair. In the dim light, she had assumed it was her husband, saying a last good night, so she softly closed the door and went back downstairs. But her husband had been away on a business trip that entire week. 3 different stories, from different times and different places. A voice in the wind, a glitch in the machine, and a mimic in the dark. Whether you believe them to be products of an overactive imagination, psychological phenomena like hypnagogic hallucinations, or something else entirely, they share a common, chilling thread. They are moments where the solid, predictable world we think we live in suddenly cracks, revealing something shadowy and unknowable hiding just beneath the surface. These stories remind us that mystery never truly went away, it just adapted to the times, finding new ways to remind us of how much we don't understand. If these true stories sent a chill down your spine, I'd like to invite you to be part of this channel. Hit that like button if you want to hear more accounts like these, and subscribe so you won't miss our next journey into the unexplained. We have a video on true shadow people encounters that you might find particularly disturbing, it's right here. And I have to ask, have you ever experienced something you simply cannot explain? A moment that defied logic and has stuck with you for years? Share your story in the comments below. I read every single one, and your experience might be the key to someone else's mystery. For now, though, as you turn off the lights and prepare for sleep, just listen for a moment. To the silence in your home. Is it truly silent? Or is it just waiting for you to stop making noise? Ask yourself, what else is listening with you? Good night. Right finger if you enjoyed the story, give it a like and subscribe to our channel for more content.